Problems of Fannie and Freddie show the danger of mixing the housing business with government, but more and more we're being told that housing is less of a business than it is some kind of entitlement, something that folks don't have to work for, but something that they deserve. Is the housing market a business anymore, or has it become another entitlement, just like food stamps or Medicare? Well, let's ask a couple of folks who have skin in the game. David Berenbaum is Executive Vice President of the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. He is an affordable housing advocacy. It is an affordable housing advocacy group. He joins us from D.C. And Sue Allen, who runs Allen Hill, a company that examines and prices toxic mortgages. She joins us now from Denver. Well, Sue, first of all, I thought that the market for these toxic mortgages had frozen up, that there wasn't a market. You say there is, and you're involved with it. Explain.
Absolutely. There are investors with billions of dollars, literally, that they're holding on to, and they're just waiting for an opportunity to purchase toxic assets.
But waiting for what? Waiting for the government to come in and put a price that's higher than they get in the market, or what?
Well, the banks have these loans that are bad on their books, and they can't afford to sell them at market price because market price is substantially below, of course, what those loans were originated at. And so, yes, the government does have to intervene and bolster the banks so that they can afford to part with these loans, or the banks will be insolvent.
But Sue, I got to tell you, before the government came in, and before we knew, back in August, say, before we knew that the government was going to get so wholly heads into the housing market, there was a market for these things. BlackRock and other organizations were buying mortgage-backed securities at, maybe pennies on the dollar, but there was a market for them until, again, the government suggested, hey, we're going to buy. And now, as we know from Elizabeth Warren, who oversees the TARP plan, we probably overspent about $78 billion for the thing because we're the government and we can't value these things as well as the market can.
Well, the market knows what these assets are valued at, and in fact, the sellers of these loans, the banks know what they're valued at as well. And the simple fact is, if the banks were to sell at market price, they'd go under. It'd be irresponsible of them to do that. And I do think that the government needs to come in and give some kind of, make some kind of intervention with the banks in order for them to afford to sell these assets and not be insolvent.
Well, David, let me go to you, because I would say if the banks went insolvent as a result of selling these toxic assets, so-called, at pennies on the dollar, then maybe they should go insolvent, and maybe people should start taking a bath, because our infusion of government money, whether it's directly in the housing market or in companies like AIG, just seems to be putting good money after bad.
You're raising very good points, but frankly, we also have to examine the absence of government regulation in the equation. Why
Wait a minute, hold on a second. Absence? Did you ever hear of anything called Sarbanes-Oxley? That's not absence of regulation.
I also know of rating agencies giving AAA ratings to junk bonds.
That was terrible.
Yeah,
the ratings agent, that's a terrific point. It is a point of discussion for something else. But the fact is, there was regulation out there. We aren't a system without regulation. It was just that there was so much free money flowing. We all got suckered into this housing game.
And we have to acknowledge the weak underwriting. I mean, what they're trying to do now is to jumpstart the marketplace so that consumers have access to quality and responsible loans, and we avoid foreclosures. And so Fannie and Freddie do have a corrective role in that, and that's very important.
It is, but Fannie and Freddie were so up to their noses in this collusion between the government and the stuff that we're hearing about Franklin Raines right now, the stuff that we're hearing about Chris Dodd is just the tip of the iceberg, David. And you know how Washington works. If you're well connected, and Fannie and Freddie was this quasi-governmental institution, if you're well connected, you get deals that most of the folks out there in America don't get.
Our concern should be the 10 million homeowners that are facing foreclosure that, frankly, is destabilizing the tax base in our communities and injuring our economy as a whole. We also need to be equally concerned about the unemployment impact in our economy. And, in fact, lending, responsible lending, regardless of who jumpstarts it, whether it be Fannie or Freddie or a government program, will lead to more liquidity and, frankly, a strong private sector once again.
But, David, I'm also concerned about that 95% of the population out there who have struggled hard to come up with a down payment, solid cash down payment for their house, have been keeping their payments together month after month after month for years. And look at the situation now of their tax dollars and possibly their child's future being put at stake for the sake of those heading into foreclosure. And they say, wait a minute, there's too much government intrusion in the market, and primarily in the housing market.
Well, I would submit to you that, frankly, the failures in the marketplace as a whole have led to the depreciation that we all have experienced across the country.
But I'm just telling you, I just told you that what happened at Fannie and Freddie were preventing the marketplace from having an effect in the housing market. They were government intrusion in the marketplace, government intervention in the marketplace. That's more, I would submit, of a problem than lack of regulation, because as I submitted before, there was plenty of regulation. Maybe not well enforced in certain areas, but there was regulation.
Yeah, then there's AIG and Lehman Brothers and all the other failures. I agree with you. The regulation was not accurately enforced, and that's why we need reform now so this never happens again.
Well, Sue, the question, Sue, though, really comes down to the one that I expressed at the beginning. Has housing now become an entitlement as opposed to a business? That is, have we given up so many business angles in terms of the housing business that to government intervention that we won't ever see a real market there at all?
You know, I don't think so. I think the private investor, for one thing, at this point, the investor knows that the best way to make money on a bad loan is to get that loan reperforming. So the private sector wants to find a way to keep people in their homes. They want to modify these loans. Now, that wasn't true a couple years ago. They wanted to race to foreclosure, get that property and sell it. But there's no point in doing that now, because what are you going to do if you get that property? You can't sell it. You can't sell it and make money. So the investor now wants to find ways to modify, and the investor has better ways to do that than a government program might. And I'd like to give all credit to the administration today for the modification program they announced. It's a stroke of genius to give people a financial incentive for making their mortgage payments. But I think
hold on, right there. Let me just hold you on that point, because that alone kind of bothers me. The fact that you would reward people for doing the right thing. Aren't you supposed to do that?
Well, I think it's better than having people not make their payments. We can all see where that's gotten us.
Yeah, but to get $1,000 just for doing something that you have signed your name in a contract to say you're going to do, I mean, no offense, but that sounds a little like the kind of spoiling we try not to do with our kids.
Right. I see your point. But I think what we have to do, personally, I think we need to get away from debating the moral issue here. I mean, the fact is, from an economic point of view, which is the point of view that the business people will take, let's do what we have to keep these people paying their loans. A paying loan is a valuable asset that will trade hands, and it will keep this economy flowing. Gang,
Sue and David, stay with us. We want to bring in our panel. Is housing an entitlement or a business? Let's bring in Tracy Burns of Fox Business, John Layfield, Fox Business contributor, and Gary Kaltbaum of GaryK.com, who joins us from Orlando. Gary, since you're the one outside of the studio here, what do you think? Has housing become an entitlement, or is it still a business?
Well, look, your guest just said it's a stroke of genius that it provides incentives to people to pay mortgages. I got news for you. It provides incentives not to pay mortgages. More people are going to want give-outs. I disagree with what they're doing. All these programs have not worked. I do believe it's a noble cause, but once again, this is not going to change the playing field, and it's only getting in front of the inevitable. Housing prices are going to go where they want to go, and most of these people are better off renting. They should not be owning houses.
Tracy?
I take issue with all of it, quite frankly, David. I mean, regulation or not, the majority of us paid our mortgages, didn't blow out our credit cards. We did all the right things all these years. And because a small little handful of people blew it, as you said, my children will be paying for this forever. I think all of it is wrong, even the $75 billion that he offered today.
Well, what about the argument, John Layfield, that when you start foreclosing on these properties, you have situations in neighborhoods where the whole neighborhood goes down. It's not just a couple of houses on the block that go down. If you have these foreclosed homes, it brings down everybody's value.
Well, you also have the problem. Look, Frank Raines is one of the ones that started this initial act that caused us to go from 64% ownership to 70% ownership. That extra 6% is what caused this entire housing bubble. And now if you're talking about more government, look, Ronald Reagan vetoed a bill with 227 earmarks. This last one had 9,000. That is stealing from the American people. And you want these crooks in Congress to run something financial? They can't do it.
Well, it still comes down to your own kitchen table where you sit and make decisions. I don't care how good it is. It's like an Armani suit that's $5,000 and it goes on sale for $2,000. It's still an expensive suit. And I think people needed to think through this. It's not logical.
Gary, go ahead.
Just to make the other point here that about all these programs, they come at a cost, and they come at a cost to the taxpayer. And so you're robbing from Peter to pay Paul, and somebody's going to pay for it. And I'd rather reward success. I do not want to reward people that either did something wrong or just bought houses at the wrong time.
And Sue, you know, another problem I have with the government sort of controlling, probably creating markets, if you will, for markets that don't exist. It's a form of price control, because if you create a market, you have to put prices into it at various points. And there are a lot of people I know in the market of buying securities, whether they're mortgage-backed securities, junk bonds, whatever, who would have gone in that market and bought up some of these instruments, try to detangle them, try to separate the real mortgages from these instruments, and use the properties to make money. They want to sell the properties, actually do the hard work, go out in the street, knock on the doors and say, hey, look, I can cut your mortgage by 50%, your principal. I now hold your mortgage and I want to do it. We've had people like that on. The market can work without the government, Sue.
No, I absolutely agree. And in fact, I'm arguing that the banks need to get these assets out into the hands of private investors, because private investors can bring liquidity to the marketplace. I absolutely agree. But how are you going to get the banks to part with these assets and fold up?
Well, maybe if you get rid of mark-to-market, that might be one of the ways they get them off the books. But we got to leave it at that, Sue. I noticed you nodding in agreement. A lot of people don't like that mark-to-market. Sue Alon.
I don't like it.
David Berenbaum, you're on record. Thank you very much. Tracy and John and Gary, we'll see you later. Coming up on deck.